I think the technical term is butthurt. A lot of these conservatives who are really super loyal to Poilievre are looking for a reason quickly to bring Carney down a couple of pegs.
Who would have thought that it would be the United States of America, Republicans specifically, standing up for Canadians like this instead of our own government? But hey, I'm just a little butthurt. I'm Jasmine Lane. Subscribe, follow, like, share, and comment your thoughts down below. CBC is acting as though they've gotten some big own in the news, when in reality, I think most of us see right through them, and they're just playing dumb. The worst part, I don't actually know that they realize that they are. The United States has doubled their duties on lumber exports in Canada effective immediately, which is definitely going to be a big blow. But hey, Mark Carney says everything's totally fine. This is normal. This is all par for the course. All that and more coming up today on Over Opinionated.
But dealing with this problem and dealing with Donald Trump specifically is exactly what he campaigned on. It was essentially his entire campaign platform. Here's just a sample.
And I think after 78 years, we can't change President Trump. So we need a leader who can stand up to him. We need a leader who can stand up. I've got someone in mind. We are supporting our friends and neighbors in the crosshairs of the Americans and President Trump. United, we are standing up for Canada. United, we will win this trade war. We will build the strongest economy in the G7 that works for everyone. That's why I'm standing here in front of you. You can handle them. We can handle them. We are going to handle them. We are going to handle them. Yeah.
Now, I know that a lot of people get very irritated having to listen to Mark Carney all the time. I hear you. I feel you. I relate to you. But what he is saying here is incredibly important for you to listen to so that you have it in your head, fresh in your memory, as we get into the rest of today's episode, as everybody else tries to completely gaslight the nation on the public-funded broadcaster.
We can handle him. We can handle Donald Trump.
I think we can influence President Trump by taking seriously some of the issues that he raises.
We can and we will control our destiny with the right plan. Because in a crisis, plan beats no plan. And to win in a crisis, we know that we must act with overwhelming force to overcome the anxieties that people feel, to break through the uncertainties that businesses face, and to replace what the crisis is taking away. That's what our plan for Canada Strong will do.
You know, it's pretty weird for a country of which many of the leaders have been so vitriolic against the United States, against the American people. And now the National Police Federation, which represents about 20,000 frontline RCMP members, has called for the force to loosen eligibility requirements for foreign applicants, specifically to enable recruitment from the United States and other countries to fill staffing gaps. Super wildly unexpected, given the state of how our country has been behaving. And also, this isn't about filling temporary vacancies. This is about importing a different police culture, which obviously raises some serious questions about accountability and national sovereignty. And let's not forget that the skill gaps we have, which they're calling for needing to be filled, those all exist for a reason. We have policing academies. We have cadets being trained right now. So the idea that we have to rely on foreign talent to staff our national police force, that sounds an awful lot like a clear sign of systemic failure, not a stopgap solution. Canada can't even staff its national police? Is that what you're telling me right now? So now the RCMP wants to import American cops? Sovereignty 101, everybody. That just got totally obliterated with that post. That's what happened. But also, perhaps that's what happens when you have no national identity. Yeah, when you're a cultural melting pot and nobody knows who they are, what they're fighting for. They see things they don't like. They're called names and dragged for calling that out. And yeah, they don't want to fight for your country because you've treated them horribly. Mark Carney announced some new funding for the military, which is interesting because it was like the same day that he announced that funding. CBC also did a hit piece about how the Canadian military is super Istonphobic because of white men and Donald Trump. And now you want to give them a pay raise, of which they do deserve, actually, but you're doing that immediately after dragging them through the mud, creating even more animosity and vilification over them and the work that they do. Just seems like such an obvious tactic. And as Mark Nixon writes, Mark Carney's speech wasn't about safety, it was about control. First, he scares you with Russia, China, climate change, and missiles. Then he tells you Canada's location won't protect us anymore. Next, he drowns you in disaster-porn wildfires, floods, melting Arctic, cyber threats. And then comes the hero montage. The military saving lives, aiding Gaza, guarding Latvia. Cue the gratitude. Now you're primed. No budget mentioned yet, but you're already ready to pay any price for protection. This isn't a speech, it's conditioning.
We're living in an increasingly dangerous and divided world. The international order, built after the Second World War and reshaped following the Cold War, is under pressure. Russia is emboldened. China is more assertive. The long-held view that Canada's geographic location will protect us is becoming archaic. Our Arctic waters are increasingly open, and there have been rapid advances in cyber, artificial intelligence, quantum, and advanced missile capabilities. Climate change is making our country more vulnerable. The Arctic's melting. Our wildfires and floods are more frequent and devastating. And these are all threats to which the Canadian Armed Forces responds. When a crisis breaks, or Canada's safety is threatened anywhere in the world, this space is the first to spring into action.
I can't tell you how many times I've had people criticize me for being a conservative woman, saying, but the conservatives are so mean and negative. All right, let's get a couple facts on the table here. The stone cold truth about a lot of what he just said. Number one, the Arctic is melting indeed. Historically, ice levels have always fluctuated a lot. It is notable that the fluctuation, the speed of loss in recent decades is a little bit higher than what we have previously recorded. But keep in mind, we've only been tracking this data for X amount of years. And a lot of scientists, many of which are also backed in some of the same things that Mark Carney is, have linked that to human-caused warming as well as natural cycles. When it comes to wildfires, are they actually increasing? Well, if you look at global satellite data, it shows that the total area burned worldwide has decreased since the early 2000s. A lot of that has to do to land use changes. In Western Canada, California, Australia, large wildfires have become more frequent and intense in recent decades. Of course, they say that's because of the climate. Stone cold truth again, though, the wildfire crisis is definitely exaggerated if you look worldwide. When it comes to certain regions that are experiencing them a little bit more, while many will say it's because of the climate, turns out it's mostly because of poor land management, and they're more disastrous due to human settlement patterns, which have also changed. When it comes to extreme weather and other natural disasters, I mean, as an example, historical data from hurricanes shows no clear upward trend in a global frequency increase. Historical flood data, pretty messy as well. No strong global increase, more flooding, more damage because more people live in those areas that may experience certain events, right? When it comes to droughts, again, no consistent global trend. Some regions have gotten wetter, some have gotten drier. All in all, yes, there have definitely been some notable changes due to the development of the modern world that could for sure be linked to some things. However, the fact that it would be the sole cause of it, that, oh, if we all just moved to net zero, if we all just stopped driving, this would all reverse. There's actually nothing other than theory to back that up. And most people who speak out against that end up getting canceled. And also, if that was the case, why does Mark Carney fly on a private jet everywhere? Why does Bill Gates fly on a private jet everywhere? Why on earth are they recommending that the general public stop doing the things they need to do to survive, like heating their homes or driving when it's cold outside? They want you to bike instead or something like that, when they don't change their lives at all. As I always say, when it comes to this, if you start leading by example, I will follow suit.
66% of Canadian softwood is currently exported, and 90% of that goes to the United States. So it's pretty significant, dealing yet another devastating blow to a forest industry, especially here in BC and cities like Campbell River, that has already been hit by permitting delays and ideological restrictions that have shuttered mills and left much of the industry hanging by a thread.
You would think, if you're just using a little bit of common sense over here, that any normal government might try to get competitive amidst news like that, right? You know, maybe increase production, decrease the red tape, cut taxes. That could be a big one. But in Canada, we just give out subsidies. Have you noticed how that is always the answer? When something is going wrong, rather than reform or change it, the government just says, we'll give you some money to shut you up a little bit. We're not going to change any of that stuff that's making life really hard for you. We're just going to give you a little bit of money right now. Yeah, just a little, here you go. Do you want it? You want it, because if you don't have it, you can't pay your bills. And it's unreal to me, but also it is solely to make people dependent on the government, while the government never changes its course, even though it would actually be so easy for them to do that. Another blow to Canadian industries, the United States has made a final decision to hike duties on Canadian softwood lumber, in some cases doubling it, more than doubling it even, which obviously is a huge, huge hit to forestry dependent communities in the country. But depending on where you get your news, this story does look a little bit different. It leaves you with a different feeling. Left-leaning outlets are calling it an aggressive hike, one that risks Canadian jobs and demands domestic policy reform. Right-leaning coverage says that it's all about enforcing trade laws and protecting American jobs, describing Canadian subsidies as unfair and abusive. And the center, well, they honestly just kind of report the numbers without any spin. And that is exactly why I use Ground News. I've been using them for years because it shows you how each side is covering a story, what they leave out, what they focus on. Ground's blind spot feature even flags stories that your side isn't talking about at all, so that you're not just caught in an echo chamber. So if you want the full story without getting one side's spin, go to ground.news/Jasmine, or you can also scan this QR code on screen to get 40% off their Vantage plan. That's ground.news/Jasmine for 40% off their Vantage plan, because in the case of this news story, at least, facts do matter more than framing. You see what I did there? Yeah? Okay. I'll also include a direct link for you to click once you're done watching this video in the description.
She said something that about Carney hasn't fixed the economy yet. Like, this is someone who worked for Stephen Harper in 2008 during the recession. Are you kidding me that you think he's going to fix the economy in 100 days? And the other thing I've noticed with the MP you had on last night, a lot of conservatives, they are saying Mark Carney said this, and no one is challenging those conservatives on that. And if you actually look, he did not say those things. I think the technical term is butthurt. A lot of these conservatives who are really super loyal to Poilievre are looking for a reason quickly to bring Carney down a couple of pegs. And I can see from this podcast that starts with Jenny Byrne.
Our interview yesterday with the conservative critic, we wanted to learn more about, how this conservative plan was going to be unveiled. And I had to ask 3 or 4 times to sort of, on this day when the party was making this announcement about something they wanted to put forward as an alternate vision for Canada on how things could be achieved, I couldn't get an answer out of her about how that would work. And we went around in a circle several times trying to sort of get to a specific answer on what does this look like? How would it work? What tell Canadians about it? I found that was a very challenging sort of moment there where I was just trying to figure out what it was.
Not insignificant that it's a conservative member of parliament on the CBC. So that has probably gone through some permission slips to get her here to that interview.
A lot of interesting things there, including somebody criticizing the Conservative Party and then a non-biased, as Mark Carney says, host, then doubling down on that criticism and really trying to manipulate the brains of people. And you know what's really interesting about that, though, is as you saw at the beginning of this clip, there's been a lot of things that Mark Carney has said that they say he hasn't said that he has in fact said, or at the very least alluded to. That was the takeaway. So I think it's pretty fair, even in some cases, if he didn't verbatim say something, that he ran his entire election campaign on that thing. And that was the takeaway of not just conservatives, of absolutely everybody. And pretending as though that it's not journalism. That's not a good a mic drop. That's you playing stupid. And it's very obvious. But in terms of this interview that they're referring to, well, I don't know. Was it actually so hard to understand what the conservatives were trying to do with their latest proposal, of which we covered in past episodes? You can be the judge on that one.
I understand. We're going to get to the criticism in a moment, and I'm going to ask you for how you would like to see Mark Carney act differently. But for Canadians who are watching this who may not have seen Pierre Poilievre's announcement today, I'm trying to understand what this plan outlines, and I'm not getting a sense of that from you.
No, I can happily provide that. I'll be quite specific. Bill C-69, which has made it impossible to build pipelines. We need to basically, there's a series of growth blocking laws that we need to repeal. Bill C-48, which banned oil tankers on the West Coast. The industrial carbon tax, which raises costs on everything for Canadians. The oil and gas cap, that's killing jobs. The EV sales mandate that will increase the price of gas-powered vehicles, the plastic bans, the censorship laws. There's a host of policies that need to be reversed, and it's a all in one, and it's a vision for Canadians as opposition, because we can't just be, parliamentarians often look at the short game, and we really have to look at the long game and how we can best benefit all Canadians.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I also watched that entire CBC interview, of which they were saying just made no sense at all. She didn't give any answers. That made a lot of sense to me. You have the Conservative Party who proposed and also put a timeline on Mark Carney actually doing something. And they say that they're going to hold him to account on that here's the outline of everything that needs to be done, and we want to see him do it. That's about as deep as it gets. We're publicly saying this is what needs to be done. Do it, because it's better for everybody. Period. And we'll support you in doing all of these things. And then CBC is like, oh, but they just don't make any sense. Yeah, Mark Carney never said that. Well, then why did he win the election?
Could I get your reaction to the jobs reports, loss of 41,000 jobs, worse than expected? Thank you.
Sure. A couple of things. One is that obviously we look very closely at developments in the labor market. We had a very strong job report in June, over 80,000 jobs created. We now have the July jobs reduction of just over 40,000. What's interesting about, if you look across those areas, the geographic spread is in the July report is more in Western Canada. It's in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Less in the manufacturing sectors, where we will expect we expect to see pressure.
In terms of the dire situation we are in this country, Kirk Lubimov says to understand how disastrous Canada's jobs are in July, you need to understand how these numbers look. The public sector is growing. Mark Carney's deficit spending is out of control, and everything that pays for all of the above, like entrepreneurship and the private sector, is collapsing.
And there are pressures, which is why we're taking action in steel and lumber, and we will in autos and other areas. I'd also note that in that jobs report, the unemployment rate held steady, and for the second straight month, we've seen a further acceleration in wage growth. So wage growth now at 3.5%, up from below 3%. So wage growth now outpacing the growth in CPI. So that, combined with the tax cut that we put in place, combined with the removal of the consumer carbon tax and other measures, progress on cost of living. Just to be clear, progress. We're not satisfied that that's enough. There's much more that needs to be done, which is why we're looking to make sure, and to bring it back to today, and why we're here. We're looking to make sure, and we will make sure, that as we build our military, we'll build our economy.
Huh? What? But of course, the Liberal government doesn't want you to know that. That's why when local journalists say, hey, Liberal government, all of your online censorship and streaming laws are really hurting us from getting the news out, Mark Carney responds then, and of course we talked about this in like 2 episodes ago, Mark Carney responds with, well, that's why we have CBC. Joke's on them, though. A group of U.S. House Republicans has officially labeled Canada's Online Streaming Act, Bill C-11, as a major threat to trade, and they are now demanding the act be rescinded. They argue that the law unfairly pressures American streaming services such as Netflix, Disney, Google, and others by forcing them to increase investments in Canadian content and altering their algorithms. And the U.S. is claiming that this imposes discriminatory burdens on U.S. businesses and violates existing trade commitments. And I am so very happy that they are calling this out, because I've been screaming this off of the rooftop since back when I was in mainstream media. And this should matter so much and make you pause, because it is a clear example that this is not about supporting Canadian content at all. Now it is explicitly a trade friction with a direct U.S. intervention. They also called out in this the deeper manipulation of algorithm and culture that have been put in place and benefited literally nobody, because this act does not fund Canadian content. That's not its sole purpose. What it does is it enables and empowers the CRTC to regulate visibility, which determines what you can see online and how you can be controlled, not just what they fund. Not to mention, there was no public debate, no transparency, and no accountability for this. This was rammed through despite free speech and user content concerns, and only now is the real cost of this becoming visible to Canadians. We have long had Canadian content rules and regulations, especially when it comes to traditional media, such as the news, such as radio. However, Bill C-11 was such a huge game changer in that it included mandating funding, demanding algorithm promotion of Canadian content that was specifically approved by them. So I may be Canadian, I don't get recommended in people's algorithms, though. That's why it's so hard for conservative content creators to grow in the country. And they also have the power to issue fines of up to $10 million per offense if, let's say, CBC decided, you know what, actually, we don't want to do that story. We don't want to talk about this. We're going to have so-and-so on. We're going to change the percentage of the Canadian content under this law that is viewed. It is insane. It is absolutely insane. And the act forces platforms to boost the visibility of Canadian programming that comply with the mandatory rules and regulations, which completely disrupts creative freedom, transparency, overreach. It also completely takes away the opportunity for independents such as myself to grow in this country. Everything about it was so bad. And if they always paraded around as, oh, yeah, well, this is just, it's so good for independent creators. We're really helping. No, you aren't. What you did is you actually got a number of people demonetized, including those who were independent content creators on various platforms, as well as those who are more mainstream. Even if it's a smaller local radio station, you hurt them big time. And they know that they're doing this. Mark Carney literally just said 2 days ago, well, that's why we have CBC. CBC is the trusted platform. It's disgusting. And thank goodness somebody is calling this out, because it's sick. It is dystopian and it's on the wrong path. And it's also completely unnecessary. In what world? Why can't Canadian content creators just thrive? Why can't you say, here you go, here's the world, we're allowing you to have it, do your best, let's see what you can do. Instead of, well, we want to make sure that we have control over who's winning and who's losing. We get to cherry pick. Oh yeah, you also get funding if you comply with these rules and regulations that you never voted on from this unelected government body that has all of this money to it. It's absolutely insane. And Bill C-11 and C-18 may be pushed as these cultural saviors, but it's nothing more than a regulatory and economic disaster. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a beautiful weekend. Make sure you subscribe, follow, like, comment your thoughts down below, and share this video because, as you can tell, it does help an awful lot.